The emergency klaxons were still blaring when Ambassador Kletch scuttled into the council chamber, all 6 of his legs moving in that particular rhythm that screamed, "I'm about to have a panic attack." His antennae were doing that twitchy thing they did when he was stressed, which, to be fair, was basically always. "It's here," he chittered, mandibles clicking so fast they sounded like a typewriter having a seizure. "It's actually here, in our sector. We're all going to die." Captain Vaughn slammed a scaled fist on the table, his reptilian face twisted into what might have been concern or indigestion. Honestly hard to tell with his species. 3 systems. We need to evacuate 3 systems, minimum, maybe 4 if we're smart. High Chancellor Prynne materialized at the head of the table, their ethereal form shimmering with what could only be described as theatrical distress. They raised 7 translucent arms toward the ceiling. The prophecy spoke of this. The end times. The great devourer. The shadow that consumes light itself. "Can we maybe dial back the drama like 10%? Kletch muttered, though he was literally vibrating with fear. The holographic display in the center of the room showed it. Sensor data from the outer rim. Every species in the galaxy knew that signature. Void Stalker. Apex Predator. Unkillable nightmare. The thing that made hardened space marines retire early and take up gardening. That's when the door hissed open. Danny Kowalski strolled in 20 minutes late, holding a coffee cup that said "Galaxy's okayest human," and looking like he'd just woken up. His uniform was wrinkled. He had bedhead. He was wearing mismatched socks. "Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Traffic was insane. What did I miss?" Every eye, sensor, and light-based consciousness in the room turned to stare at him. "What did you miss?" Kletch's voice went up about 3 octaves. "We're discussing the end of civilization as we know it, and you stopped for coffee." Danny took a long sip. "I mean, yeah, it's going to be a long meeting, right? Always is with you guys." He plopped down in his chair and propped his feet up on the table. Vaughn looked like he wanted to bite them off. Chancellor Prynne's form pulsed with indignation. "Human Kowalski. A Void Stalker has been detected near the Epsilon trade routes. We are coordinating a full evacuation and potentially abandoning the sector entirely." "Oh, is that all?" Danny pulled out his datapad and scrolled through some files. "Which Void Stalker? Can you send me the sensor data?" The room went silent except for Kletch's nervous clicking. "Which one?" Vaughn's voice was dangerously quiet. "There is no which one. There is only pray you never see one, and die screaming if you do." Danny's datapad pinged. He glanced at the scan data, zoomed in, tilted his head, and then his face lit up. Oh man, that's Steve. I was wondering where he went." Kletch fell off his chair. You know it." Prynne's 7 arms were trembling. "You have named the abomination?" "Well, yeah. I've been studying him for like 3 months now." Danny swiped through his photo gallery, because of course he had photos, showing a massive crystalline entity of pure darkness floating near his ship. "See? Steve. He follows me around sometimes. It's actually kinda cute once you get used to all the teeth." Vaughn had his weapon halfway out of its holster. "Humans cannot be this stupid and have survived as a species. This is a Void Stalker. They are unstoppable. They are immortal. They have destroyed entire fleets." "Yeah, fleets that shot at them first," Danny said, scrolling to a video. "Look, here's Steve doing a little spin when I gave him some spent reactor cores. Last week. See? He's basically a lost puppy. A 30-meter-long puppy made of nightmares and crystal. But still." Chancellor Prynne leaned forward, their form shifting through several colors of disbelief. "You are claiming that you have domesticated a Void Stalker." "Domesticated is a strong word. We're more like friends. Buddies. He helps me clean up my ship's waste radiation. I don't shoot at him. Everybody wins." Kletch had climbed back onto his chair and was gripping the edge of the table. This is insanity. This violates every protocol, every safety regulation, every shred of common sense. Danny shrugged. Look, you guys want to evacuate 3 systems and lose trillions of credits in trade, be my guest. Or, and hear me out here, you could let me prove that Steve's not actually dangerous. You just gotta come with me. Absolutely not, Vaughn growled. Hard pass, Kletch added. Danny stood up, finishing his coffee. Cool. I'll just file a report saying the human delegation thinks you're all overreacting and refusing to examine new evidence. I'm sure that'll look great in the historical records. Human makes first contact with misunderstood species. Council runs away screaming. There was a very long pause. Vaughn's eye twitched. If we die, I'm killing you first. Fair enough. Danny grinned. Let's go meet Steve. Danny's ship was called the Terrible Idea, which was printed right there on the hull in big cheerful letters. Kletch stared at it for a solid 30 seconds before turning to Vaughn. We're going to die, aren't we? Probably, Vaughn muttered, checking his plasma rifle for the 18th time. I heard that, Danny called from the boarding ramp. And for the record, she's only crashed twice, and one of those was barely even my fault. Come on, let's go make some bad decisions. The interior of the ship was exactly what you'd expect from a human who named deadly space creatures after random Earth names. There were empty coffee cups everywhere. A pizza box that might have been from last week or last month. Posters of something called classic rock bands plastered on the walls, and the pilot's chair had a cushion that said, "My other ship is also a disaster." Danny dropped into the seat and immediately started blasting music through the ship's speakers. Something with aggressive guitars, and a man screaming about living on a prayer. Does the noise serve a tactical purpose? Vaughn asked, strapping himself into a seat designed for species 3 times smaller than him. Yeah, it serves the purpose of being awesome. Danny grabbed a bag of chips from somewhere in the control panel, which raised serious questions about his organizational system, and started munching while plotting a course. Steve usually hangs out near the Croton Nebula. Lots of cosmic radiation there. It's like his favorite restaurant. Kletch had buckled himself in so tightly he couldn't move. We are voluntarily flying toward a Void Stalker. This is the opposite of survival instinct. This is suicide with extra steps. It's called science, buddy. Now who wants to take bets on how long it takes Vaughn to actually shoot something? I will shoot you if you don't take this seriously, Vaughn growled. See, 5 minutes. I'm good. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, and for about 20 minutes, there was just the sound of guitars, crunching chips, and Kletch muttering prayers in 17 different languages. Vaughn sat completely still, his eyes fixed on the weapons console like it was the only thing keeping him sane. When they dropped back into normal space, the Croton Nebula spread out before them in swirls of purple and green. It was actually beautiful, in that this radiation will kill you in fun and exciting ways, kind of manner. Danny leaned forward and activated the external comms. Steve, buddy, where you at? I brought some friends. Well, I brought 2 extremely reluctant aliens who think you're gonna eat them, but still. He's talking to it, Kletch whispered. He's actually talking to it like it's a pet. I'm starting to think humanity survived evolution purely by accident, Vaughn said. Danny cranked up the ship's scanners and grinned. Oh, he's coming. I can always tell because the background radiation spikes right before. Every alarm on the ship started, screaming at once. Contact, Vaughn roared, his finger on the trigger. Don't you dare. Danny slapped the weapons console offline. That's Steve. You'll hurt his feelings. The sensors were going absolutely insane. Something massive was approaching fast. Too fast. Kletch had stopped breathing, which was impressive since his species needed to breathe pretty regularly. Then it appeared. 30 meters of crystalline darkness materialized outside the viewport, like someone had cut a hole in reality and filled it with teeth and angles that didn't quite make sense. It had too many edges, too many surfaces that reflected light in ways that light wasn't supposed to bend. Eyes, or things that might have been eyes, glowed with a soft purple that would have been pretty if they weren't attached to a creature that looked like death had a baby with a kaleidoscope. Kletch made a sound like a kettle boiling. Vaughn had his rifle aimed at the viewport, his hands shaking so badly the targeting laser was drawing circles. And Danny waved. He actually waved at it, fingers wiggling like he was greeting a neighbor over a fence. "Hey, Steve, looking good, buddy. Have you been eating well?" The Void Stalker just floated there, watching the ship with what might have been curiosity. Then, very slowly, one of its crystalline appendages moved. It waved back. Kletch fainted again. Vaughn's rifle clattered to the floor. His mouth was hanging open, which for a reptilian species was really saying something. Did it just wave? Told you he's friendly. Danny was already pulling up the cargo bay controls. "Okay, watch this. This is the cool part." There is no cool part. Kletch had regained consciousness just in time to panic more. We are staring at a Void Stalker, the literal apex predator of known space, the thing that... Yeah, songs of terror, nightmare made flesh, I've heard the speeches. Danny hit a button, and the cargo bay doors opened. A reinforced container ejected into space, tumbling slowly towards Steve. That's 3 spent fuel rods and about 40 kilos of reactor waste. Stuff's been sitting in my cargo hold for weeks because nobody wants to pay for proper disposal. Steve moved. Not in that aggressive, predatory way that made space marines wet themselves. More like excited. The crystalline entity flowed through space, wrapped several appendages around the container, and then it ate it. Just straight up absorbed the entire thing into its body. The container dissolved, and the radiation inside lit up Steve's crystalline structure from within, making him glow like the world's most dangerous lava lamp. Then Steve did a barrel roll, an actual, honest-to-God barrel roll, like a dolphin showing off. "Oh my gods," Vaughn whispered. "It's happy. The Void Stalker is happy." "Yeah, Steve loves this stuff." Danny was grinning like a proud parent. Void Stalkers don't hunt organic life. They eat energy, radiation, plasma, exotic particles, whatever. They're basically the universe's cleanup crew. All that waste we've been hauling to disposal sites for centuries. Steve and his buddies would literally eat it for free. Kletch's antenna had stopped twitching. He was staring at Steve with something approaching wonder. But the attacks, the destroyed ships, the fleets that never came back. Those ships shot first. Danny pulled up some historical data on his datapad. Look at the records. Every single Void Stalker encounter that went bad started with someone firing weapons. And what do weapons produce? Energy, radiation, plasma bursts. Basically, we've been smacking them in the face and then acting surprised when they smack back thinking we're trying to steal their lunch. Vaughn slumped in his seat, his entire worldview clearly crumbling. "You're telling me that the most feared predator in the galaxy is actually just a scavenger that we kept picking fights with?" "Yep." Danny tossed another container out the airlock. Steve caught it like a dog catching a frisbee. "I figured it out month 1 when Steve started following me. I'm a waste hauler, right? My ship's always got spent fuel, old reactor cores, radioactive whatever. Steve thought I was running a mobile buffet. Once I started intentionally feeding him instead of trying to outrun him, we became best buds." Outside, Steve had finished his second snack and was now just floating there, pulsing gently with absorbed radiation. He looked content, maybe even peaceful. "This is the most absurd thing I've ever witnessed," Kletch said quietly. "And I once saw a Thaxian try to negotiate a trade deal while drunk." Danny shrugged. "Look, I'm just saying, maybe if everyone stopped screaming and shooting long enough to actually observe behavior, we'd realize half the monsters in space are just misunderstood. Steve here, he's not a killer, He's a garbage disposal with anxiety who just wants some radioactive snacks and maybe a little appreciation. Vaughn was still staring at Steve. The Council is never going to believe this. Oh, they're gonna have to. Danny started plotting a course back. Because I've got 3 months of documented footage, sensor data, and behavioral analysis. Plus, you two just watched Steve do a happy dance after eating nuclear waste. That's some pretty compelling evidence. Steve drifted closer to the viewport, and for just a moment, those glowing purple eyes focused directly on Kletch and Vaughn. The two aliens froze. Then Steve's crystalline body shifted, creating what could only be described as a smile. It had too many teeth to be comforting, but the intent was clear. "He likes you guys," Danny said. "Congratulations, you just made friends with a Void Stalker." Kletch looked at Vaughn. Vaughn looked at Kletch. "The entire galaxy is going to lose their minds," Vaughn said. "Yeah," Danny grinned, waving goodbye to Steve as the ship prepared to jump. "It's going to be hilarious." The emergency session of the Galactic Council had never been so packed. Word had spread fast. Apparently, nothing got representatives to show up faster than the phrase, "That insane human actually survived meeting a Void Stalker on purpose." The chamber was standing room only, which was saying something considering half the species present didn't technically stand. Danny walked in with the same wrinkled uniform and that infuriating coffee cup, followed by a still-shaken Kletch and a unusually quiet Vaughn. The murmuring stopped immediately. Chancellor Prynne materialized at their podium, all 7 arms crossed in what was unmistakably the universal gesture for, "You have some explaining to do." Their ethereal form was pulsing an irritated shade of amber. "Human Kowalski, you are supposed to provide evidence that Void Stalkers are not an existential threat. Instead, we received reports that you fed one, waved at it, and according to Captain Vaughn's preliminary report, it waved back." "Technically, Steve waved back," Danny corrected, pulling up his datapad. "And yeah, all of that happened. Want to see the footage?" "We demand to see the footage," came a voice from the Thalaxian delegation. "This violates every known protocol about Void Stalker encounters." "Buddy, everything I do violates protocols. It's kind of my thing." Danny connected his datapad to the central display, and suddenly the entire council chamber was watching a crystal-clear recording of Steve happily devouring a container of radioactive waste and then doing a barrel roll. The silence was deafening. Then everyone started talking at once. Shouting, really. In 47 different languages. "Order!" Prynne's voice boomed through the chamber, somehow cutting through the chaos. "This is clearly some form of human trickery, digital manipulation, special effects. Humans are known for their entertainment industry." "It's real." Vaughn stood up, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd had their entire understanding of the universe turned upside down. "I was there. I watched it happen. The creature, Steve, consumed nuclear waste like it was a delicacy. It showed no aggression. In fact, it displayed what I can only describe as playful behavior." Kletch rose on shaky legs, his antenna twitching nervously. "I hate to agree with the human, but Ambassador Vaughn speaks truth. I witnessed it myself. The Void Stalker was not hunting, it was scavenging, peacefully." A Turellian ambassador in the back row stood up, their 3 heads all talking at once in perfect synchronization. "This is preposterous. Void Stalkers have destroyed 17 colony ships in the last decade alone." Danny pulled up another file. "Yeah, let's talk about those 17 ships. I pulled the black box data from 12 of them. Public record, by the way. Anyone could have done this if they'd bothered. Want to know what every single one has in common?" He highlighted sections of the logs on the display. "They all fired first. Every single one. The moment they detected a Void Stalker, they opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, the works." He zoomed in on one particular log. The colony ship Perseverance encountered a Void Stalker near the Deneb system. Captain ordered immediate weapons discharge. 47 plasma bursts in 30 seconds. And what do plasma weapons produce, folks? Massive amounts of radiation and energy particles. You know, the exact thing Void Stalkers eat. Acrylic's representative's scales flushed purple with indignation. Are you suggesting those ships provoked their own destruction? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm showing you the data. Danny pulled up video after video, log after log. Look at it from Steve's perspective. You're floating around, minding your own business, looking for your next meal. Suddenly, something starts throwing food at you really aggressively. What do you think? You think it's trying to feed you, or you think it's trying to steal your feeding territory? So you defend yourself. You push back. And unfortunately, when you're a 30-meter crystalline entity that eats radiation, your defensive push tends to be pretty fatal for the other guy. Chancellor Prin's form had shifted to a contemplative blue. You are proposing that centuries of Void Stalker encounters have been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of their nature. I'm not proposing it. I'm proving it. Danny switched to a live feed. This is happening right now, about 40,000 kilometers from this station. I've got Steve waiting out there. Anyone want to go say hi? I promise he won't bite unless you shoot him first. The chamber erupted again. Half the delegates were shouting that this was too dangerous. The other half were demanding more proof. A few were already calculating the economic implications. It was a Centaurian trade minister who asked the question that changed everything. She stood up, her voice cutting through the noise. Human Kowalski, you mentioned that this creature, Steve, consumes radioactive waste. How much waste are we talking about? Danny's grin got wider. Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Based on my observations, a single Void Stalker can process about 5 tons of high-grade radioactive material per day, and they love it. It's like premium fuel for them. Makes them happy, healthy, keeps them active. The trade minister's eyes went wide. 5 tons per day, per creature. Yep. And here's the fun part. I've been tracking Steve's patterns. He's not alone. There are thousands of Void Stalkers out there, probably tens of thousands, all floating around looking for naturally occurring radiation sources. Nebulae, decaying stars, that kind of thing. But you know what has way more concentrated radiation? Our waste disposal sites. The Centaurian finished, her voice barely a whisper. Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. Danny pulled up a galactic map showing waste disposal routes. The galaxy produces an estimated 70,000 tons of radioactive waste annually. We pay billions of credits to store it, transport it, bury it on dead worlds. Meanwhile, we've got a whole species that would eat it for free and actually thank us for the meal. Chancellor Prin leaned forward, all 7 arms now uncrossed. You are suggesting we use Void Stalkers as a waste management solution. I'm suggesting we stop treating them like monsters and start treating them like the symbiotic species they actually are. We've got a waste problem. They've got a food shortage because we keep shooting them away from the good feeding spots. Seems like a pretty easy fix to me. Vaughn stood again. There is strategic value beyond waste management. Since Steve has been following Kowalski's ship, he reports 0 pirate activity in his routes. What pirate is going to attack a freighter that has a Void Stalker escort? Oh man, I didn't even think about that, Danny laughed. Free, security and waste disposal. Steve's the best employee I never had to pay. A Yultron diplomat raised a tentacle. This seems too convenient, too simple. What is the catch, human? The catch is you all have to admit you were wrong for about 300 years, and I was right after 3 months. Also, you have to stop calling them Void Stalkers. That's a terrible name, very prejudiced. We should call them Space Friends, or Radiation Recyclers, or... Absolutely not, Prin interrupted. But we will consider a formal redesignation if your proposal proves viable. Danny pulled out a document he'd apparently prepared in advance. because of course he had. I've drafted a pilot program. We set up feeding stations along major trade routes. Spent fuel rods, reactor waste, low-grade radioactive materials we're already disposing of anyway. We put it out. Steve and his buddies come get lunch. Everybody's happy. We run it for 3 months, track the results, and then decide if we want to expand. Kletch was looking at the proposal on his own datapad, his antenna doing that thing they did when he was simultaneously horrified and intrigued. This is insane. This could actually work, which means it's definitely insane. I want a live demonstration, Chancellor Prynne declared. Now, if this Steve is truly waiting outside, bring it to visual range of the station. Let the Council see with their own senses that a Void Stalker can be approached safely. Danny's grin could have powered a small sun. Oh, you're gonna love this. 20 minutes later, every viewport on the station was packed with representatives trying to get a look. Danny had called Steve over the comms. Hey, buddy, come say hi to my co-workers. They're finally ready to meet you. And sure enough, that familiar sensor signature appeared. Steve materialized about 500 meters from the station, his crystalline form catching the light from the nearby star and refracting it into 1,000 colors. He just floated there, peaceful and still, while every weapon system on the station tracked him nervously. Danny had convinced the station commander to jettison a single spent fuel rod. It tumbled through space, and Steve moved to intercept it with all the grace of a dancer. He absorbed it, lit up from within, and then he waved. At the station, at all the thousands of terrified, amazed, confused aliens watching him, somewhere in the council chamber someone started laughing, then someone else. Then the entire room was filled with the sound of 47 species all losing their minds at the same time. Chancellor Prynne's form had turned a resigned shade of green. Very well. Human Kowalski, your pilot program is approved. You will coordinate with the Waste Management Committee and the Trade Route Security Division, and if this goes wrong, it won't, Danny said confidently. Steve's a good boy, aren't you, buddy? Through the viewport, Steve did another barrel roll. I'm putting. Convince the galaxy that Void Stalkers are friendly on my resume, Danny muttered. That's got to be worth a raise, right? Kletch looked at him. You're not getting a raise. You're lucky you're not getting a psychiatric evaluation. Tomato, tomato. 3 months later, Danny walked into the Galactic Council chamber wearing an actual suit for the first time in his career. It was still wrinkled, and he was still carrying that same coffee cup, but hey, progress was progress. The chamber was decorated for a ceremony, which immediately made him suspicious. Banners from every member species hung from the ceiling. There was even one of those fancy holographic projectors showing highlights from what the media was calling the Void Stalker Revolution, though Danny still thought Steve's excellent adventure had a better ring to it. Chancellor Prynne was practically glowing. Literally, their ethereal form was doing this shimmery gold thing that apparently meant they were pleased. Human Kowalski, 3 months ago, you presented this council with what we believe to be either the most brilliant or most suicidal proposal in galactic history. Why not both? Danny muttered. The results have exceeded our most optimistic projections, Prynne continued, ignoring him. 73 feeding stations established across 12 sectors. Over 4,000 Void Stalkers. We're calling them stellar recyclers now, officially. Kletch interjected from his seat. He'd gotten significantly less twitchy over the past few months. Turned out regular exposure to Void Stalkers was either therapeutic or had broken something in his brain. Jury was still out. Over 4,000 stellar recyclers, Prynne corrected with only mild irritation, participating in the waste management program. Radioactive waste disposal costs have dropped by 68%. Pirate activity along participating trade routes has decreased by 92%. And most remarkably, we have had 0 hostile encounters with the recyclers in the entire 3-month period. Danny raised his coffee cup. Told you Steve was a good boy." A Thalaxian representative stood up, her bioluminescent spots flashing in what Danny had learned was their version of enthusiasm. "The economic impact alone is staggering. My homeworld's waste management budget has been reduced by half. We're redirecting those funds to education and infrastructure. My trade convoys are operating at maximum efficiency," added a Krelix merchant, his scales now a happy orange instead of that stressed-out purple. "The recyclers don't just deter pirates, they've become navigational landmarks. Ships actively route toward them for safety." Vaughn stood, and Danny noticed he was wearing some kind of ceremonial armor instead of his usual combat gear. From a military perspective, this has been transformative. We're establishing protocols for cooperative operations with the recyclers. Early tests suggest they can detect quantum anomalies and spatial distortions that our sensors miss. They're not just waste disposal, they're potentially the best early warning system we've ever had. Plus, they're adorable, Danny added. "Don't forget adorable." "They have too many teeth to be adorable," Vaughn grumbled, but there was no real heat in it. Chancellor Prynne raised all 7 arms for silence. "Which brings us to today's ceremony. Human Kowalski, this council has voted unanimously, and I must stress, unanimously, which never happens, to award you the Medal of Exceptional Diplomatic Achievement for your role in establishing peaceful relations with a previously misunderstood species. You're giving me a medal for making friends with Steve? We are recognizing your contribution to galactic peace, prosperity, and environmental management." "Yes." Danny scratched his head. "Huh. Cool. Does it come with a cash prize, or—" "It comes with our gratitude and respect," Prynne said firmly, though their form flickered with what might have been amusement. "So that's a no on the cash. Got it." The medal ceremony itself was surprisingly pleasant, even if the medal was designed for a species with 4 shoulders, and Danny had to wear it like a really aggressive necklace. There were speeches. Someone from the Centaurian delegation read a poem about cooperation and understanding that was either deeply moving or completely nonsensical. Danny's translator couldn't quite decide. But the best part came after the formal ceremony, when they opened the station's main observation deck for a reception. And there, floating in perfect formation outside the massive viewports, were 17 Void Stalkers. 17 stellar recyclers, Danny corrected himself. Though he'd never stopped calling them Void Stalkers in his head because it sounded way cooler. Steve was in the front, of course, but he'd brought friends. The council had started a registry 3 weeks into the program, and now every single one of the creatures outside had a name and a designated handler. There was Gerald, a slightly smaller recycler who'd bonded with a Torellian waste hauler and apparently had a fondness for expired plasma batteries. Patricia, who'd claimed a route near the Andromeda Relay and had developed a reputation for being extremely punctual. She showed up at the same feeding station every day at exactly 1400 station time. Susan, who was the largest recycler yet documented and had somehow become best friends with an entire Krelix mining operation. "This is the weirdest timeline," Danny said, watching the recyclers drift lazily through space like a pod of cosmic whales. Kletch appeared next to him, holding some kind of fluorescent beverage that Danny definitely wasn't going to ask about. "You know what the strangest part is? Every species in the galaxy is now debating what to name their recycler. There have been 3 diplomatic incidents over naming rights. The Ultrans and the Centaurians almost went to war because they both wanted to name the same one, Sparkles. Who won? They're sharing custody. It's called Sparkles 7 now. Don't ask about Sparkles 1 through 6. Danny laughed so hard he almost spilled his coffee. "We went from treating them like space monsters to fighting over who gets to name them. That's character development right there." A chime sounded through the observation deck, and Chancellor Prynne's voice came over the speakers. "Attention all attendees. In honor of today's celebration, we will be conducting a feeding demonstration. Human Kowalski, if you would do the honors." Danny handed his coffee to a very confused Kletch and walked over to the waste disposal control panel. A technician showed him which buttons to push. Apparently they'd built in a whole ceremonial feeding system just for events like this, which was hilarious on multiple levels. He activated the external comms. "Hey, Steve, you hungry, buddy?" Through the viewport, Steve's crystalline body lit up, and he moved closer to the station. The other 16 recyclers perked up too, like dogs hearing the food bowl being filled. "All right, I've got a special treat today. High-grade plutonium waste from the station's reactor core replacement. The good stuff." Danny hit the release button, and a reinforced container ejected into space. Steve caught it instantly, wrapped it in his crystalline appendages, and absorbed it into his body. The radiation lit him up from within, making him glow like a star. The light refracted through his crystal structure, creating patterns that danced across the observation deck in blues and purples and colors that didn't quite have names. Then Steve did 3 barrel rolls in a row. The observation deck erupted in applause. Actual applause. For a Void Stalker eating radioactive waste. Patricia and Gerald wanted in on the action, so Danny released 2 more containers. Soon all 17 recyclers were doing acrobatic maneuvers, showing off, creating a light show that was genuinely beautiful. Someone started playing music, that same aggressive guitar stuff Danny always listened to, and somehow it fit perfectly. Chancellor Prynne materialized next to Danny, watching the display with what he'd learned to recognize as their contemplative expression. "Human Kowalski, I have a question, if you'll permit it." "Shoot. How did you figure it out? In 300 years of encounters, across hundreds of species with advanced technology and scientific methods, how did you succeed where everyone else failed?" Danny watched Steve do a synchronized spin with Gerald, the 2 recyclers moving in perfect harmony. He thought about it for a moment, really thought about it before answering. "I think everyone else was so busy being afraid that they forgot to be curious," he said finally. Yeah, Steve's big and scary looking and can absolutely wreck your ship if he wants to. But so can a lot of things in space. Doesn't mean you shoot first and ask questions never, you know." He turned to look at Prynne. "I just treated Steve like I'd want to be treated if I was some weird crystalline entity floating around space, with a little respect, a little curiosity, and a lot of snacks. Turns out that works on pretty much everything." Prynne's form shifted through several colors before settling on a warm amber. "That is perhaps the most profound and simultaneously the most ridiculous philosophy I've ever heard." "Yeah, well, I contain multitudes." Danny grinned. "Plus, Steve just seemed lonely, you know, following my ship around like that. Nobody else would even get close to him. Poor guy probably hadn't had a decent conversation in decades." "You have conversations with Steve?" "Well, I talk at him mostly. He's a good listener, though. Never interrupts. Doesn't judge my life choices. Honestly, he's better than most therapists." Outside, Steve had noticed Danny through the viewport. The massive recycler floated closer, pressing what might have been a face against the transparent aluminum, those glowing purple eyes fixed on Danny with unmistakable affection. Danny waved. Steve waved back, using 3 different appendages. "You've changed the galaxy, you know," Prynne said quietly. 3 months ago, Void Stalkers were our greatest fear. Now they're becoming part of daily life. Children draw pictures of them. Merchants name their ships after them. There are recycler-themed restaurants opening on 5 different worlds. There are what now? The Patricia's Palace chain is apparently quite popular. They serve radioactive-themed cocktails. Non-lethal ones, thankfully. Danny burst out laughing. "That's amazing. That's the best thing I've heard all day. Does Steve get royalties?" "We're still working out the legal framework for that." The reception continued for another hour. Danny talked to representatives from a dozen different species, all of them wanting to share their recycler stories. A Yultran captain showed him a photo of Sparkle 7 doing something that looked suspiciously like posing for the camera. A Krellix engineer explained how Susan had helped them detect a micrometeorite storm 3 days before their sensors picked it up, saving their entire mining operation. Everyone had a story. Everyone had a new appreciation for the creatures they'd feared for centuries. As the event wound down and people started filtering out, Kletch found Danny again. "So, human, what's next for you? You've achieved galactic fame. You've got a medal. You've revolutionized waste management and xenobiology in one incredibly weird package. What does Danny Kowalski do for an encore?" Danny looked out at Steve, who was now playing some kind of game with Gerald that involved tossing a piece of space debris back and forth. "Honestly, I'm just going to keep hauling waste and hanging out with Steve. Maybe see if I can find more misunderstood space creatures. I've got my eye on those quantum eels everyone's terrified of. I bet they're just cranky because nobody's tried feeding them properly." "Please don't," Kletch said immediately. "Please, for the love of all that's holy, do not try to befriend the quantum eels." "Too late. I already sent a research proposal." Kletch's antenna drooped. "I need a vacation. A very long vacation on a planet with no humans and no space creatures of any kind." "Good luck with that, buddy. Steve's cousins are everywhere now. Pretty soon there won't be a trade route in the galaxy without a recycler hanging around." And Danny was right. Within a year, stellar recyclers had become as common as freight ships on the major routes. Within 2 years, they were being integrated into defense networks. Within 5 years, children across the galaxy grew up thinking of them not as monsters, but as helpers, protectors, friends. The galaxy's most feared predator had become its most beloved neighbor, all because one human with a wrinkled uniform and questionable life choices had decided to try feeding it instead of shooting it. As Danny left the observation deck that night, Steve followed his shuttle back to the terrible idea, floating alongside like always. Danny opened a comm channel. "Hey, Steve, today was pretty good, huh?" "We got a medal." "Well, I got a medal. You got some premium plutonium. I think you got the better deal, honestly." Steve pulsed with light in response, his crystalline body glowing contentedly. "Yeah, me too, buddy. Me too. Come on, let's go home. I've got some spent reactor cores with your name on them." And as the terrible idea and its Void Stalker escort jumped to FTL, Danny smiled. He'd come to this station 3 months ago as a nobody-waste hauler with a crazy theory. He was leaving as the guy who'd proven that sometimes the scariest things in the universe just needed someone willing to see them differently. Plus, he had a really cool medal. That was wrinkled now because he'd stuffed it in his pocket. Some things never changed. But Steve had changed everything.